Service has really dropped off around here lately.
I know, it's our last episode and we've got no one to pour us a beer. Bloody hell, we might just have to help ourselves, eh? What's been happening this week, Brendan?
Well, let me tell you.
So the controversial trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was passed this week, but it's got a little bit of a way to go before it actually starts affecting our lives. Can you tell me a little bit about it, Brendan?
So it's got to get through all of the parliaments of the countries that signed up to it, and it's got some pretty high profile people talking it down as well. Someone like Hillary Clinton has come out against it. Now, we did a pretty big wrap up of this topic a few weeks ago, so if you want some more information, check that one out. So the big news this week has been coming out of Nauru. Can you tell me about it?
Right, so the Nauruan government has announced that by the end of the week it will have processed all 600 asylum seekers who are living in the Australian Detention Centre on Nauru. And what this means for the asylum seekers who are there is that basically they can come and go from the detention centre as they wish, but they can't actually leave the island.
Now, at the start of the week, the Australian government was pretty far from this, and they were trying to make it look like the decision was Nauru's and Nauru's alone. But as the weeks progressed, it's become evident that there's probably a little bit more to it than that. The Australian government is using the changed conditions at the centre in a High Court challenge that they're currently facing to defend the existence of the centre. Right,
so the High Court case is basically challenging the constitutional validity of Australia running Australian government detention centres in foreign countries and sending people who come to Australia to those foreign offshore detention centres.
Now, you might often hear people refer to people who come to Australia by boat as being illegal immigrants. Now, the reason someone might deem them illegal is because they've sought to come to Australia in a way that wasn't the legal avenue that's been set up by the UN. So, if you follow that rationale, you might think that it's fair enough that the Australian government wants to detain those people in Australia in a manner fit for them coming over here. However, the question then becomes if they've got the right to detain those same people in similar conditions in countries that aren't Australia.
Right, and so this Nauru Detention Centre is funded by the Australian government and it's contracted out to private security providers who basically run the day-to-day operations of the centre. It's a huge part of the Nauruan economy and it comes with a whole lot of development aid and extra money that basically Nauru really relies upon that money to import food and water and fuel just to keep the country ticking over. So it's kind of an interesting power dynamic there because the Nauruan government is kind of held to ransom by Australia on this. They really need that detention centre to maintain the running of the country. And if Australia says, hey, we want to change how this detention centre runs, Nauru will be pretty quick to move on that.
So in light of this High Court challenge, the Australian government's been trying pretty hard to kind of wash its hands of the Nauruan Processing Centre and make it look like it's more of a responsibility for Nauru than it is for Australia. And they've kind of started by changing the language in which they talk about the centre. While we used to call the centre a detention centre, we're now calling it a processing centre.
And look, I don't know what the High Court is going to decide on this, but I really reckon that if you're sending people to a tiny remote island and you're locking them up on the island, whether they can leave the detention centre or not leave the detention centre, I think that amounts to detaining them. And I really do think that the Australian government will be in hot water over this one.
And just a reminder, it's
not illegal to seek asylum. So a dumb question this week comes from Georgie, who's asked, what is all this High Court challenge stuff?
So the High Court is the highest court in Australia and it performs a couple of different really important roles.
The first one is that it has the power to interpret the Constitution. So what this means is that it looks at legislation made by governments and it basically decides whether that legislation is valid or invalid according to the powers that the Constitution gives to governments.
Now this is really important because it shows that our law system extends further than just ruling over individuals and companies. It shows that we've got the power to actually scrutinise the governments of the days and make sure that they're playing within the rules. And that's what we're seeing in the High Court challenge about Nauru at the moment.
And the second function of the High Court is that it's the highest court of appeal in Australia. So if you've got a case and you're fighting it and you're going to appeal and appeal again and appeal again and appeal again, eventually you're going to end up in the High Court. And that's what happened in the cult movie classic, The Castle.
I'm shitting myself.
So that's it for Politics at the Belleville for this week and for the rest of the year.
We're graduating in a couple of weeks' time, so we'll be out of here, but hopefully someone will be here next year to fill our chairs and keep you up to date with what's going on in the news.
We hope you've learnt something from this. We certainly haven't.
But it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Cheers.
Cheers.